Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears, ladies and gentlemen. You are tuned to the MC Lars podcast. This is a long episode. I talked to Matt from Wheatus. He also plays bass with Mike Doty of Soul Coughing, front a lot. He plays bass with me a lot. Today is Monday, February 10th. This is episode 76. And Matt also plays in a band with his wife called the Ventura Project. I'm on tour right now with the Double Clicks and Schaefer the Dark Lord. We are driving to Orlando today. And the Double Clicks join us for the last week of the tour, but I wanted to shout out the rest of the dates. Nerdcoretour.com for tickets. It's my only tour of the year. Orlando the 11th, Atlanta the 12th, Austin the 14th, Dallas the 15th, Oklahoma City the 16th, Kansas City the 17th, Minneapolis the 19th, Chicago the 21st, Cleveland the 22nd, Ann Arbor the 23rd, Columbus the 25th, and Rochester February 26th. So this is my interview with Matt, one of my favorite people. It actually was his birthday last Monday, and we're going to end with Wheatus' cover of Mbop. So because it's such a long interview, we're going to jump right into it. This week's episode is brought to you by the Patreon Larsens. Thank you all for your support. For only $4 a month, you can get 2 brand new MC Lars songs and have access to my entire back catalog. That's crazy. Shout out to the new supporters, Eric Marshall, Dragon Raygun, and Brad. And shout out to the old ones, Rebecca Lau, Ross Mack, and Austin Green. Thank you all for your support. This is my interview with Matt Milligan from Wheatus.
Just start recording and we can talk.
Boomer lives, Mark Maron. Okay, Boomer lives.
Classic. That's good.
You know, Mark, because his cat died, right?
Yes, I did know that his cat died.
That's what's up. Matt Milligan.
Hi.
Matt Milligan from Wheatus, and you play with Mike Doty.
Yeah.
And Front a Lot.
And you, when I'm really lucky.
When I get to tour with Wheatus, especially.
Yeah. Or when you have a residency at Gold Sounds.
That was 2 years ago.
2 years?
3.
No, seriously?
2018.
So like 2.5 now. Jesus.
Should do that again.
Yeah,
but maybe
we should.
just do one Lars Fest and have all my friends open and make it an annual.
It was a really fun. That was a really fun thing to do.
Shout
I
out
loved
to Will
the
Telly.
fact. Yeah, shout out to Will Telly on the drums, and all of the. I mean, you had. It's a testament to how many like super cool creative people you know, because like every one of those shows was stacked.
Yeah, with great openers.
Yeah.
It was cool. It was this thing about locally, can you make people care enough to come see you 5 times in a row?
Sure. Yeah.
And the trick is you have openers who have different fans.
Mm-hmm.
Holler.
Yeah. Exactly.
So Matt, we were just talking about Star Wars.
We were talking about Star Wars. I was saying I saw the Rise of Skywalker. Well, the start of this meetup here was that I caught you on Instagram talking to people trying to understand how Star Wars works.
Right, trying to figure out the chronology, and Clone Wars is such a gigantic thing with all, like 3 series about it, and then this upcoming Disney Plus one.
Yeah.
Plus the movie. How familiar are you with the Clone Wars?
Not very at all. I'm not, it's funny. I've seen all of the Star Wars movies. I have not seen The Mandalorian.
You haven't?
I've heard it's good. No, but I haven't done the Disney Plus thing yet. But I've seen all the movies and I enjoy them, but I'm definitely not like, I wouldn't call myself a Star Wars fan, even though I'd like them, just because I feel like that's a real loaded thing to say. Like, I really liked The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. And then when I talk to people who are like Star Wars fans, they get really upset and they try to tell me why I shouldn't like it. And I just don't.
What do they say? Without spoiling too much.
Yeah, no, without spoiling.
Well, when Rey dies, it's sad.
That's true. That's true.
Oh, whoops.
No, that like, I think people who grew up with these movies, which I actually kind of didn't. I did see them as a kid, but they weren't really like a part of my childhood. Like I know they are for so many people.
Because you don't have that high school memory of going to see episode 1 with all your friends when you were like in high school. You would have been in like 4th grade when it came out?
I did go see episode 1 in the theater when it came out. I must have been in like middle school. I'm trying to remember. We could figure it out, I guess. What year did
that was
Phantom
98,
Menace?
I think.
98, so I was like 12.
Oh, okay. Well, that's still old
So
enough.
I was old enough to go see it, and I actually have a memory. I was in high school when episode 2 came out. And I remember being very upset.
You didn't like it?
I did not like that.
But there's an epic scene where Yoda fights Darth Sidious.
Yeah, like the CGI Yoda is like doing all the backflips around and stuff. And I remember I was also at that point, I think in that particular phase of my teenage years, I was going through a real smug movie snob phase.
What, you thought it was CGI Yoda was
I didn't
not
like
real?
the CGI stuff, and I don't know, I did not dig. Yeah, there you go. You just brought it up.
And by saying he fought,
Darth Sidious. Yeah, see, look at it. I would have not even remembered that name.
And I almost spoiled it by saying his other name, but saying this gives away the Last Jedi.
Wow, yes, it does.
So it didn't.
How about that?
The only reason I know that is because I was watching summaries about episode 2 and 3 to figure out where the Clone Wars goes chronologically, because apparently it comes between the second one after Jango Fett is killed and the third one. See, it's all this nerdy
so
stuff.
Much. It is so much of that. Anyway, so like I don't know a lot of the nerdy stuff, but I thought that I loved Last Jedi. I thought it was really I thought it was one of the more beautifully shot of those movies. I thought it looked amazing.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really compelling, and I liked what they added. I think the things that I liked about it are the things that Star Wars fans didn't, because they thought it was like messing with characters in a way that wouldn't have happened. But I don't have. There's so many people with so many people who have read books about these movies, people who have seen series, and again, Clone Wars, all this stuff, and I just don't. So the idea of like, I would never profess to know what someone would or wouldn't do.
And then there's this whole thing, Matt, that I'm learning about, that there's like dozens of books, maybe like 100 books plus. And Lucas and Disney at a certain point determined which of those books were canon and which were not.
Yeah.
And so Clone Wars the Christmas special is not canon, apparently.
It's too bad.
But I'm going to do a song about that for this Patreon project, all the Star Wars stuff. And I wanted to say that there's a kiss between two characters that we won't mention. I saw it like
in the Christmas special.
No, I'm sorry, in Last Jedi.
Oh yes.
And when they did that, I watched it on like the first showing on Thursday, and someone yells out "Forbidden!" and everyone laughed. So
yeah. I'm actually so nervous about like for all of the more recent Star Wars movies. I've made a point to wait. I don't even go on opening weekends. Like I wait like a week or two to then see it, because I feel like I'm not prepared or qualified.
You don't
to
worry
sit
about spoilers
with that audience, and I don't worry that much about spoilers. But the idea of sitting in an audience where someone would yell something like that, and I would just be there going like, I don't get it. I'm not prepared to engage in this conversation mid movie.
There's a guy interviewed Luke Ski. He does parodies, and he has a Death Star Christmas or something. He does really funny stuff and a lot of Star Wars stuff. Anyway, he texted everyone the morning of before it came out. He's saying, "Hey guys, I'm trying to avoid spoilers, so if you need to get a hold of me today, text or call me because I'll be off the internet." And I wrote back, "Luke, you take this serious." So
can I tell a really funny spoiler story that happened to a friend of mine?
We got time, bro. Yes.
This is from a different fandom. This is Harry Potter world.
Oh.
And this is just like heads up, spoilers for Harry Potter, but I think we're all probably okay at this point on that. My friend Keith, when the second to last book came out, Half-Blood Prince, he got it and was so terrified of spoilers that he basically locked himself in his bedroom with this book and would not leave until he finished it, because he was afraid someone was going to ruin something for him.
Someone like slip food under the door.
Exactly. Yeah. So he just sat there and read this book. While he's reading the book, his dad is watching the news and sees a report about how people are spoiling the end of this book. People are actually going around and spoiling this story. And he misunderstands what the spoiler is and then goes up to the room. Keith is like 3 chapters from the end of this book. He's so close. And his dad just opens the door and just says, like in the most like making fun of him way, just goes like, "I know who kills Dumbledore."
And so he misunderstood the spoiler because the spoiler was saying it's about Dumbledore.
He thought that the spoiler was who kills Dumbledore, not the fact that Dumbledore dies.
Oh.
Keith did not know that Dumbledore was about to die. He was a few pages away from that moment of the
Dad.
book. And this kid just like locked himself, was like, "No one talk to me." And his dad just throws the door open and yells out this spoiler, like pages from the end.
Well, here's the thing. If you're going to be a nerd, like nerd out on things and dedicate your life to like deep, like media in a transgressive kind of way, you got to move out from your parents.
That's true.
Because
That's true.
they have every
That's
right
true.
to like.
I know they can just
denigrate your
do
child
those
like
sorts of things.
love.
Yeah.
Maybe he was in high school.
He was a young enough person at that point that it was. That was the sort of moment that makes you move away from your parents' house as soon as you're old enough.
Right. So you can live in childlike wonder.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do I know this friend?
Keith. I don't know if you do. You might have met him at one point. He's the brother of my friend Craig, who Craig's the. Ooh, good segue. Craig is the person who introduced me to Brendan Brown many, many years ago. So
you tour with a band called Wheatus, who are known for their hit Teenage Dirtbag.
Yes.
And you have toured the world with these homies. And you and Brendan are probably the two longest playing people in the band.
Yeah, I mean, well, Brendan founded the band himself.
He was on the podcast. Like, he was episode 4.
He was very early on,
He gave me a new hope.
He was a two-parter, right?
Yeah.
Which makes sense. That dude just talks and talks and talks.
Well, now I do it as one. Yeah, it was like, we did like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
That's what's up. And the cool thing about Brendan is, you probably appreciate this story. He came over and brought his mics and helped me set up because I didn't have this fresh setup yet.
Yeah.
And he helped make it happen. He drove all the way from Long Island just to sit down with me.
That sounds about right.
Love you, Brendan.
That sounds about right. Brendan goes all in on everything he does. He
Yeah.
never will half-ass anything.
And your guys' hit album has what, the 2-decade anniversary this year, right?
This year, 2020. Yeah, the debut album came out in 2000. So this is a big year for us. So we're going to do we're doing a reissue of the record, which Brendan is, I'm sure, right now feverishly working on.
Re-recording the songs, right?
Yeah, re-recording the songs and doing 10 additional songs. So it's going to be like a double album now. So
are you including Punk Ass Blank?
we are not.
Because Pete wrote that?
No, this guy, Rich, who was actually the original bass player for the band, he wrote that song.
So
And
every
not
song
Brendan.
but that.
Yes.
Are you doing, are you going to do Too Soon Monsoon, otherwise known as Hand Over Your Loved Ones? Nope. Suck Phony.
There you go. You
Yeah.
did it.
That's album 2, right?
That's album 2. You know, it's funny. It was it last year or 2 years ago? I think it was 2 years ago, actually, because we did it at Lars Fest, was the 15th anniversary of Hand Over Your Loved Ones. And when we just played at Lars Fest, we played Hand Over Your Loved Ones in full for the first time ever.
And was that the only time?
We did it 2 or 3 times after that in the UK at like some special shows. That one's a funny one because that record like barely even came out. It is not. That was the record that got Brendan kicked off Columbia Records.
I have the Australian Columbia release on CD.
It came out like in a couple countries. It definitely didn't come out in America. Every once in a while, people find it in UK shops, but like it's sort of like they might have started printing them and then just been like, never mind.
Because it didn't have a song that reacted like Teenage Dirtbag.
The label did not like it, and they wanted Brendan to to try again. Basically, they were like, start over and do better, and he said no, and then they let him out of his contract.
It seems like talking to him and his quest, and tell me if you agree and if you can comment on this, that everything happens so quickly at the beginning with like playing huge shows internationally, charting internationally, that it feels like he has this love of technical preparation and organization to make sure that everything is in his control. So when and if it happens again, he'll have control over it, as in having independently released albums, having the band he likes, you still go into like a stereo to the house, right? You mix it on stage.
We do actually now send the like standard individual instruments to the front of house, but now we have a sound guy. So for a long time we were not touring with a sound guy, and that was why we had the stage mix. And then it was just, it took the control away from some local guy who Brendan thought would not know like what we wanted and how we wanted to sound.
Stereo mix, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the problem with that was in certain rooms that worked really well, and in certain rooms it just did not. Like it was there were times where if a room was like really prone to feedback, it would be very hard. We had to play really quiet to not feedback because the guy didn't have control of microphones separate from instruments.
But in like when y'all were opening for Bowling for Soup, like in a huge like academy or something with giant speakers, I bet
in those rooms amazing. It worked pretty well. Yeah. We actually had a harder time in smaller rooms, which is odd. That's like the opposite of what most bands would experience.
But not Wheatus. You never do anything conventionally.
We always do, everything's the hard way in Wheatus. And the weirdest, hardest way.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, here's the thing: when you have a song that's that iconic in your catalog, you can be as weird as you want.
Absolutely, yeah. I think
and pay everyone to be
exactly.
in the band.
And going back to your original point, I think that a huge part of Brendan's approach came from a place of, when I've never been. I joined the band right after Columbia happened. Like basically, just as the band was regrouping after that experience
was it 07?
06. The very beginning of 06. So this is my 15th year. I'm starting now with the band. It's actually almost to the day. I joined in January of 2006.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. I think that in that experience, I think a huge part of it that really rattled him so much was the idea of not having control over so much of what you do. Like it's your band and it's your face on the product.
Right.
But then there's elements of it that other people are controlling and you don't have say in where you're going to play and how you're going to play. And if you're going to have to lip sync on this TV show as opposed to doing that is so frightening that, cause it'll never fall to some random person who makes the decision. It only falls to the person who's actually out there doing it.
Right.
So like if something was done in bad taste, it would go to Brendan, even if it wasn't his idea and he actively fought against it. So I think after that experience, now being on his own, a huge element of, sort of the side effect of years of that is keeping control over everything as best he possibly can. And having everything really, really incredibly specific and incredibly this is the way I want to do it. From truly every element of being a band he has that level of command over,
And having a full band with what's the setup? So it's you on bass. Who's playing drums these days?
We actually currently have two people playing drums. So it's Leo Ferrari has been the drummer for the last few years. And then last year we had a tour. We were doing a tour in America with Mike Doty and Leo couldn't do it. So we brought on Matt in class, who's now also playing drums for us. Basically, the two of them are sort of switching off based on they're both really good and they're both in high demand.
They're both New York
we
guys.
Take what we can get. Yeah, Madden is actually she is a student at Berkeley.
Oh wow!
And she took a semester off to hit the road with us last
Sounds
time.
familiar.
She also played with Doty. I know, it's funny. She at the time that she joined, she was 19, which was the same age I was.
Wow.
There's a lot of crazy parallels. Although she has not. She's already in the process of going back to take more classes.
Right.
I never went back.
Because Wheatus never really slowed down, did it?
No. I thought at the time. I mean, we should backtrack a little bit. And I was going to NYU studying music, the music tech program at NYU, which is basically production and recording techniques and all that kind of stuff. And while I was there, I met Brendan through a mutual friend, who's my friend Craig, who I mentioned earlier. And their bass player was leaving, and we hit it off, and I went and I auditioned, and I got offered the gig, which was a tour was happening a couple weeks after I joined. And I took a leave of absence from NYU. I really thought I was going to go back. I didn't think that I was able to take a 2-year leave, no questions asked. And I thought that's enough time, but it was not, because again, it's now 15 years.
So you, towards the end, you had to make a decision, didn't you?
At about a year. So it's funny, January of 2006, and then I would say by January of 2007, I knew that I wasn't going to go back, because we did 2 American tours in 2006, and then at the beginning of 2007, we were scheduled to do 3 UK tours.
One of which was
with you.
Yeah.
I met you. We met at James Bourne's house.
Yeah.
In that was probably April. Yeah, in London, April of 2007, something like that.
And we were both wearing Mindless Self Indulgence shirts.
That's right, we were.
So we knew we'd be friends.
Hit it off right away.
And you're the youngest, or you were the youngest member of the band.
I was the youngest. I'm not anymore, which is a weird thing.
That's weird, right?
Yeah, it's changed.
Time. I guess 15 years will do that.
I know. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So,
And so that's interesting, man, because if you had gone back to school and taken 2 years off, they may have replaced you.
Almost certainly, yeah.
So with someone who would, so you wouldn't be doing, maybe you wouldn't have been a professional musician, which is the irony of being in music school.
I know. It's funny. And Madden and I have talked about this a million times. She is actually, for me, it was an easier decision to make because she's on a scholarship to Berkeley. She's
Wow.
got a full ride scholarship to Berkeley.
Woo.
So that's harder to stop doing. I totally get that. I was paying to go to NYU, and for me, it was just like, well, am I going to get paid to do what I want to do, or am I going to pay a bunch of money for these people to allegedly teach me how to do the thing I'm already being offered jobs to do? It just didn't make any sense. I couldn't justify it in any world. So
could you take your credits you've taken and then do like a bachelor's someday if you wanted?
Probably. I have no idea if there's like a time limit on whether or not they would transfer somewhere. I don't know. I've thought about it a little bit. To be honest, at this point, if I went back to school, I would probably just want to study something else from scratch. Like, I love music and I love learning about it, and I feel like there's always more to learn in music, but the idea of doing it independently is so ingrained in me now that I would not.
Yeah.
I would be hard for me to justify the cost of going back to school to study music. I would go back to do any... If I ever decided I wanted to do something else with my life, I'd be happy to do that.
You got time, G.
That's true, yeah.
And you were studying with Danielle Gaga, right?
Yes,
Is that her real name?
Stephanie.
Why did I think Danielle? That sounds like an Italian name. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't believe you remember that.
You were Lady Gaga was your year?
Yeah, we were in the same year.
Whatever happened to her?
Yeah, she just fell off. Nobody heard it. No, and ironically, we actually dropped out at the same time.
Oh, wow.
We did. Yeah, we left at the same time. I didn't know her that well, so it's not like...
But you saw her around.
Yeah.
You had classes with her?
I did have a class with her. We had an oral comprehension.
Did she?
Oral, AURAL, which was like a sight singing.
Oh, that's not...
Oh, it was horrible.
That
was like one of the most stressful classes.
Was she awesome at it?
She was pretty good at it, but the thing that we bonded over a little bit was that she was in music, like even at NYU, which was not like a traditional music school.
Right.
Most students are either jazz or classical.
Oh.
Because that's the background. And she was the only other person in the class. I am only from like a rock music background, and she was the same.
Right.
She didn't really have like... So in these classes, you're supposed to like... sight sing along to, you pick your solo. So everyone's doing like John Coltrane, Miles Davis type solos. And she and I were the only ones that were doing like rock music. Like she did a Guns N' Roses guitar solo.
That's tight.
Yeah. So that was the one sort of thing we had in common.
That's
but
awesome.
I even remember back then she used to do like open mic type shows, and she played at the bitter end. And
how did she dress? Did she dress conventionally?
she was like she dressed normal. Well, certainly nothing like now, but she definitely had the vibe of like the sort of like cool but weird, like, sort of gothy, sort of just like art school kid.
So she was like Brendan's clone.
You could tell that like from her high school, she was like the sort of like weirdo artsy kid who like had, her little small circle of friends, but a bunch of people were just like, oh, I don't know what to make of her.
Right. Yeah. That's cool. Did you do the sight reading a cappella, or was it with the tracks?
Both. You definitely had to do it a cappella at one point. That's not my thing. That was very hard for me.
But you've collaborated with many different artists and you play keyboards, bass, you play guitar?
I play guitar. I play guitar with a couple people, with Gabi Alter, who
that's what's up.
Who is a frequent collaborator with MC Frontalot, G minor 7.
And I'm actually interviewing him next week.
Are you really?
For the cast.
Hey, there you go.
This kind of coalesced because we went to Damien's 71st birthday?
Something like that.
No, he's only 52. We went to his No, I'm so mean to him. No, I love MC Frontalot. He turned 40 whatever, 45?
45. That sounds right.
Whatever.
Let's go with that.
We were at his birthday party and we were like, let's do this podcast. And
that was a really nice hang. I hadn't seen you in a really long time.
That was tight.
And that was a nice group of people.
It's mean to like clown on your friends for being older, because one day we'll all be that age.
It's true, right?
And now it's like that whole thing going back to the okay boomer. Like I feel like this whole notion of doing music as a career is kind of in this uncertain world, unless you have this like 1 in a million chance, it's a really dumb thing to do. Like professionally as your only source of income.
Absolutely.
Unless you have like a hit band you're playing with, or you get lucky,
Even then it's certainly ill-advised.
It's dumb as heck.
Yeah. It's not a good idea. I mean, it's if it wasn't for a fluke coincidence, again, that I knew a friend of mine met Brendan and they were talking, and Brendan randomly mentioned he needed a bass player, and my friend gave him my number.
Your friend who read Harry Potter, or his friend,
the
that guy.
brother. His brother. There you go. It all comes back to that. If it wasn't for that, I would have just stayed in NYU. I would have finished. I would have graduated with a music degree and probably
Be teaching.
6 figures of debt.
Oh gosh.
And I would have a very different job. I'd maybe be teaching. I'd maybe be like doing coffee runs at a studio.
Right.
Who knows? But I mean, it's it is like, it's never lost on me how much of this world is fluke, coincidence, and getting, I never want to like take away from talent, because talent is obviously really important as well. But the number of times I think about like just the luck of the random connection, like the idea of like, oh, if I hadn't met that person who knew that person who knew that person, it just wouldn't have happened.
And all these adventures you've had.
Yeah, exactly.
Places you've seen.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it's not ill-advised to do music. I think that it's got to be a journey towards feeling like you're in control of things. And I think a moment where Brennan really aided me in that, and we also clashed, was doing the Robot Kills record, which you play on.
I do, yeah.
And I was living with him, and it was this whole thing about, this is something we created, but meanwhile I had a team of people who had ideas on what to do with it and everything. And it was like Brendan had been in my shoes, and he was like, just forget everyone. Let's just release this thing. And it was still needed work. And it was such an interesting combustion of the confluence of like the old music industry, the new music industry, doing the rare thing where you sit down for a month and just write songs. And he was just donating his time and energy to work on this project. And he was so generous. And like, that was an interesting moment. But I learned from him that he said something that I'll never forget, is that the industry exists around people's actual ability to write songs and play them. And that's something like the lawyers and the managers typically can't do, or if they tried to do it, they didn't really succeed. Mm-hmm. And so that quote unquote magic is what you have to bottle and protect and be like very careful about that. But that being said, it helps when you have like a platinum hit song.
It's true.
Or you're in a subgenre where like just the subgenre kind of exists and has fans no matter what, like I'm talking about nerdcore or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting lesson. And I wonder what like music industry lessons have you learned from Brendan that you couldn't have learned from NYU?
It's so different anytime you do anything as opposed to you just hearing about how to do something. And I think that the idea of putting absolutely everything of yourself into a project, and it doesn't matter, really believing in what you do, and it doesn't matter if people don't like it. It doesn't matter if people tell you that, because people will tell you that you're wasting your time, like your best days are behind you and you should move on.
Ouch.
Which happens all the time. I mean, that's a real common thing. Wheatus has gotten that for years. And it's really, really easy to believe that. It's really easy to feed into it and look at it sort of, going back to what we were saying. I think if you think about this practically, it doesn't make sense to do music, right?
Right.
From a practical sense, it doesn't make sense. But the reason why you do it, the reason why I do it, the reason why everybody we know who does it, is because you have to just be driven to do it and believe in it so completely that you don't know. It's sort of like, if this doesn't work, I don't know what else I'm going to do. Right. So I have to just give this absolutely everything I possibly can. And that's the sort of thing that, like, to see that firsthand come from somebody is very powerful and has definitely been ingrained in me, whether I'm playing with Wheatus or whoever I'm playing with in that moment. It's extremely important to me to feel like I couldn't possibly give it any more than I am while I'm there. Because if it doesn't feel like it's the most important thing, it is like, you might as well do something else.
What's the Hamilton song, Not Gonna Lose My Shot.
Not throwing away my shot.
Yeah.
I've never seen Hamilton, but
Yeah, Not Gonna Throw
Yes.
Away My Shot. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
the thing. Or Lose Yourself, Eminem. Like,
Yeah.
all the iconic, inspiring people that we love, musicians, told us it's good to have a dream. It's good to do something non-conventional. And if you can make it work financially, do it. Go for it.
Yeah.
And I think I wonder if like the post millennials have I should interview like a younger artist, but like if they have this idea, like if it's insane and indulgent to do what we've done, or if it's actually more practical because of all the tools available and the fact that you can build an audience easier and you're not so beholden to a machine. But at the same time, Facebook and all the labels and everything maintain control over like proprietary algorithms and who does get heard and what does chart. So I don't know. I wonder if it's dumber. I'm looking at a negative light. If it's less practical to be a musician now as the institutions crumble and like everything's uncertain, or if it makes more sense to like do that passionate risk.
I feel like in the last few years, expectations have definitely changed. I feel like I've seen that in my time here, where when I was in school and I was coming out of high school, there was still a real feeling of you could get rich. Like you could be wildly, wildly successful and famous doing this. And I think that obviously that's still the case. Stars are still generated all the time in this
MC
business,
Front a Lot.
like MC Front a Lot. But
Brandon B. Brown.
but I think that at this point, there actually does exist like a world where people can make really specific and weird and interesting art,
Right.
and make enough money that they can actually just do it and have it be self-sustaining, like more of a middle class
Right.
model, which has built up over years. And I'm speculating a little bit here, but I think from younger generations and up and coming artists, I think I feel like expectations have changed a little bit. I don't think a lot of people are as dead set on record deals as they were even 15 years ago when I was getting started. I think people that was still like the be all end all, like you got to get signed. That's the thing. And now I think people are like, I don't actually have to get signed because I can make something and I can put it up on SoundCloud or YouTube or Spotify by myself and watch it take off. And, people have seen examples of, guys like Chance the Rapper who have just managed to, there's proof that you can do it in a new way.
Right.
And I think that has definitely changed things a lot.
And it's interesting how the recent Wheatus stuff is a lot weirder than the old stuff.
Absolutely.
And mixed differently and it's just very artistic. It's like seeing Warhol in one room and then seeing like seeing Guernica in the other room, and it's the same band.
Yeah.
Which is great.
It is. Well, I think we're in an interesting position where, in a way, Brendan is incredibly lucky that he can do whatever he wants creatively, because he has the resources to do it from having a hugely popular song. That song continues to sort of fund the band in many ways. We still tour and we still get to, there's other ways to generate money. But over the years, that song has just been licensed so many times and it's been covered and it just keeps popping up in places that...
Sampled by Mickey Avalon.
Oh, boy. I would... If that ever sees the light of day, wouldn't that be something?
I wonder if it ever get leaked.
Yeah, I mean, I
don't know.
I'm uniquely positioned to leak it, but I don't...
We talked about it, I think, when I interviewed him.
Did you?
Why do you think that song is so timeless and like unable to, like, why do people love that song who aren't teenagers?
Yeah, it's a great question. I honestly don't know. It has sort of mystified us for years. Like, there's been a real, there's no false modesty, but there's been a real concern for so long that like we tour fairly regularly, especially in the UK. We go over there and we do a tremendous amount of shows every single year, and we've done it for about 10 years straight now without a break. And every time we sort of think like, this might be the last time that we can get away with this.
Right.
Like people are going to be like, you know what? I've heard the song.
Right.
I'm good. I don't need to keep going to these shows. And it just keeps happening. And whether it's, it's been covered so many times by so many different people who kind of, I think that's been a part of what's kept it alive. Obviously, I'm sure you and Brendan talked about the whole One Direction thing. And that was a real, that was a clear marker of a generation who really had no business knowing the song suddenly now have heard it, and it's been presented to them as something new.
Right.
And that was very cool. And then we've even had, bands that we really dig and respect, like Weezer covered the song a few years back, and Dashboard Confessional did it for a while.
Wait, isn't it a Weezer cover? I remember Napster tricked fools back in the day.
It did. Well, that was why Weezer did it. That they, it's interesting. I guess Weezer in the UK are not nearly as, maybe not quite as notable, or maybe we're just more notable there, but the balance was much closer. So in the UK, people really mixed us up.
Right.
So they started covering Teenage Dirtbag as a joke, just not even saying it was a cover. They just started adding it to their set.
Right.
And
didn't Weezer play it at Reading and Leeds or something?
They did it at Reading and Leeds. That was a few years back, yeah. And then since then, when they've gone over there and just done club shows, they periodically will just throw it in.
Aesthetically, that song is interesting. For me, it's this moment between Beck and Blink 182, right? It's even though Blink 182, I guess, predated it, between the aughts pop punk. But Brendan's always it's not a pop punk song. It's a folk rap song. But so many people I don't know. That's why it makes sense for y'all to open for Bowling for Soup or something like that.
It's really interesting because I feel like if you listen to it on its own, in terms of instrumentation and musically and stuff, it's really not that much of a pop punk song. I think his vocal style, and a huge part of it is just where it was in time when it came out. It's interesting, and I don't think Brendan will be mad at me for saying this, but we just did a thing. Wheatus has a Patreon, and we do requests there. We did a run where we let people vote on songs they wanted us to cover. And we did a cover of Mbop by Hanson.
Yeah.
And that song came out in 1996, I want to say.
Uh-huh. That, by the way, was the first MP3 I ever downloaded.
Really?
Yeah.
It was one of the first CDs I ever owned.
Holler.
Middle of Nowhere by Hanson. And the production of that song is really similar to Teenage Dirtbag. And when we listened to it, we're like, this is kind of crazy, because it actually does sound a lot like it. It's got the acoustic guitar thing. It's got drums that are really kind of punchy, almost like a hip hop drum beat. You can tell someone's playing drums, but they're definitely the Dust Brothers produced that song. I didn't know it until we just did the cover. That blew my mind. They did that right after the Beck record, which is crazy.
I should talk to Brendan about. We should end this podcast with that cover. That'd be ill.
Yeah, we could definitely do that.
That'd be tight.
Definitely do that. It's
high pitched chorus.
It was and the record scratching, the hip hop influenced record scratching that plays throughout the song.
Where's the scratching in Mbop on the chorus?
It's throughout the whole chorus, and you don't really notice it because it's buried in there. But it's loads of it.
Who's the DJ credit on the Teenage Dirtbags single?
Pippi Long Scratchings.
Who is Pippi Long Scratchings?
I don't know. I've never met him. Apparently,
it's the actual guy.
It is a real guy. Brendan has lost touch with him. We don't know. It actually came up in conversation recently because we're re-recording the song, and we had to do new record scratching, and it was none of us.
You couldn't afford Pippi Long scratching.
It's not that we couldn't afford him. We couldn't even find him. We didn't know where to look. Brendan had no idea how to contact him.
He was shot in a Hanson rivalry drive-by. Pippi Long shootings.
Yeah. So we wound up recreating it.
That's not funny because gun crime in America is sad.
It's true. Yes.
Go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. We did it ourselves. I actually had I have a digital sort of DJ deck thing, and we wound up doing scratching on our own to try to recreate it.
So it's for 20 years by playing it live, you guys have been perfecting this new version of it. How does it sound? If I were to listen to it and the original, would I be happy?
I think so. To be honest with you, I haven't, Brendan's still working on it. The last version I heard, I think he's gotten really, really close. It's a bizarre process to re-record existing songs.
Can I ask, is it because Capitol for Perpetuity own the master? Is that why you're redoing from scratch?
Columbia owns the master. Yeah, they. So the idea is...
But y'all own the publishing.
We own the publishing.
Okay.
So if we have a master, we're going to re-release it as a celebration of the record. But in terms of this is just business side of things.
Right.
just a little bit of backstory. If you have a song and somebody wants to use your song in a commercial or a movie or any sort of thing like that, they pay you a fee to use the song, and if you own the publishing, you get that fee. But then they also have to pay something called a master sync fee, and that's to use the recording. It's the difference between the song, which is just like a piece of music, and the recording of that song.
Right.
So Columbia Records owns the recording of Teenage Dirtbag that was featured on the first album. They own that all of the recordings from that record they own.
Do they own the second record, or they gave it?
No, they gave it back to us.
Because of the Post-it.
Exactly. They only own the first record.
For those of you who want to know that story, listen to the early episodes with Brendan B. Brown. That's a little asterisk, like Marvel Comics.
Perfect.
For this. Okay, back to Matt.
So if we have our own version of Teenage Dirtbag that sounds pretty much the same as the original or very, very close, we could make a deal. Let's say somebody wants to use Teenage Dirtbag in their TV show. They can use our version for a much lower master sync fee, because Columbia's sync fee is really high because they own the master.
You know how much it is?
Popular song. I don't actually.
Yeah.
I think it varies from case to case.
Okay.
Basically, a master sync fee, they can just charge whatever they think it's worth in that moment.
But so when One Direction covered it in the Morgan Spurlock movie, they had to
They didn't have to pay the master sync fee
just
because
the publishing.
they covered it.
But Brendan had to approve it.
Brendan had to approve it, and he did.
But he didn't approve the McYavalon thing.
No, well, that was more complicated because that was they wanted to own. It was they had rewritten the verses to the song, and so it was about sharing the writing credit. And they wanted, I don't remember the numbers, but we'll say they wanted more than what Brendan thought was fair.
Right.
For a very slight rewrite of a couple lyrics.
I mean, that would have given McYavalon a whole second win.
Maybe. Or maybe it would have ruined our cred forever. Who knows?
It's funny how so back to re-recording the single. So the plan is you're doing the 20th anniversary album. How do you make sure that people are listening to that on Spotify as opposed to the Columbia one? Wait, Columbia?
Columbia, yeah.
Or that's probably not the intention, is it?
It's a great question. No, I think that we've been talking about that recently, actually, and like what to do. In addition to recreating the album, you have to recreate the artwork and all that kind of stuff. And we were just talking about doing something new with the artwork where it stands out in Spotify in the tiny little image to make it clear that it's not the original album. You know what's a weird thing that has kind of bothered us for a long time, but in this case might work in our favor, is the version of the first Wheatus record that's on Spotify and iTunes and every streaming service right? is censored. They have never
take
posted
out Gun.
Yes, but the whole record is the edited version. They've never posted the explicit version of the record.
And meanwhile, that got all the plays.
But we get asked truly all the time, like, why can I not hear an unedited version of Teenage Dirtbag? And we don't have the answer because we don't have the rights to. We can't do anything about it. It's up to them to post that material because they own it.
And you know how quickly labels like to work with the old catalogs.
But it will be nice to say that the version that we're going to post is the only version that's actually unedited, that's available online. So that's kind of fun.
That is fun. That's it. I remember that. And there's two versions, right? There's like the soundtrack version and then the album version.
Yes.
It's different ISRC numbers, so they're not collated.
Yeah, I think still to this day, which is kind of bizarre, but I think the version that has the most plays on Spotify is the one that is from the Dawson's Creek soundtrack.
Which is edited.
Ugh. Yeah.
Oh, man.
It's weird.
Interesting. So you met Soul Coughing's Mike Doty through your time with Wheatus.
Yeah, we met through, we actually met through...
Handjob Academy.
Handjob Academy, yes, exactly. And we had invited them to... This goes back to the weird connections in this world, right? I was just thinking about how I said earlier, like people knowing each other is how all of this stuff happens. It was just the most random connection. We met... Because
Brendan met her on the subway, right? She was talking about Warped Tour, and he's like, I have friends who do Warped Tour.
That's right.
And she's like, who is this fool?
We met Handjob Academy through... it was a random meeting there, and I think then actually Frontalot had some connection, like knew of them at least, and there was... Anyway, we met them, and we did a week of shows in the UK with Handjob Academy. That would have been 2014. 14 sounds about right.
Yeah.
It must have been 2014. And then in 2015, we loved having them out. We wanted to have them out for an entire tour. But when we reached out, they couldn't do it. Scheduling wise, it just was too long. And at the time, Claire was dating Mike, and I hadn't met him yet, but Brendan was on the phone with Claire, and she was saying, like, I'm sorry, we can't do the tour. And the way I've heard this story is literally in the background on the phone, Brendan heard Dodie just go, I'll do it. Huh. And we couldn't imagine. I mean, Brendan and I, and most of the band, honestly, were like huge old fans of his and of Soul Coughing.
El Oso, what a record.
Yeah. And the idea of him opening for us just didn't even register. It was like, what? No, that's not how this would ever happen.
But in England, they weren't as big, right?
They were not. He had not been to the UK in a long, long time. So he was into it. And we were like, yeah, if you want to, that would be amazing. So he came out, and we wound up backing him up on that tour, which we have made a habit of doing. We did it with you on the first tour that we did with you over there. And it was great. And he and I especially like really hit it off. And now I've done 5 tours with Mike, which has been fantastic. I mean, earlier this year we did
5 tours. Wow.
Yeah, I did 2 runs with him in 2019 doing, it was the 25th anniversary of Ruby Vroom, Soul Coughing's first record, which was the record that got me into them. And
with the guy out with his face with the goggles on the cover.
Yeah. And we did that record in full every night, and I played like keyboards, samplers, and stuff for that, which was really, really wild. That was definitely a career highlight for me. I would have never thought that I would be able to do something like that.
I'm proud of you, man.
Great.
What's the difference? So how would you typify the difference in the States between Wheatus fans and Soul Coughing fans, or is it hard to because they're all just at the show? Soul Coughing fans, I imagine, are older.
They are definitely older. You know, so this was the interesting thing about going out. We did a run in the States with Wheatus opening for Mike. So right. I was doing both sets with Wheatus. When we invited Mike to the UK, he opened for us. And then in America, Wheatus does not have as much draw. So Mike headlined and we opened for him. And I played in both sets. And his crowd is definitely a little bit older, but
they know Teenage Dirtbag, I guess.
Some of them did and some of them didn't.
Right.
And it was so you were talking about like the newer material is like so different.
Right.
And it was really like interesting to get to play for an audience where basically they didn't already have an idea of who we were. You know, there was not a loaded concept idea that like Wheatus is an early 2000s pop punk band, which is how we're known in Europe,
right? Pretty
much exclusively,
right? And Australia,
yeah, most of the world. And in America, like a few people knew Teenage Dirtbag, but we didn't close with it. We did it in the middle of the set. And we were able to lean on some of Brendan's more sort of like singer-songwriter-y music.
Did you do the Green Day cover?
No, we did not do the Green Day cover. We didn't do... Oh, we did a Tragically Hip cover on that tour, and we did a Rush cover.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
And y'all played a Rush cover at the wedding, Closer to the Heart, right?
No, Time Stands Still.
Time Stands Still when we went during the walkout.
Yeah.
I'm crying.
Yeah, me and Brendan and Joey.
That was a beautiful gift.
It was. That was...
Thank you.
You're welcome. That was... talk about something to add to a fun list of things I've done, is doing a Rush cover in a church at a wedding was wonderful.
And I met Ash. I mean, we'll go back to... I want to talk about Dodie in a second, but I met Ash because they played South by Southwest because they had done the tour with Frontalot and Miss Eves and y'all.
Yeah.
And... Ash knew about me. She's a little younger, so Claire knew about me through college radio, but Ash hadn't heard my music really, but Brendan would always wear my shirt. So she's like, who is this MC Lars? So I kind of had cred with her because of Brendan's wardrobe. And we both, like, obviously, as a mentor to both of us, like, we both had that in common. We started dating, like, and the fact that she toured the UK and I'd see their stickers backstage.
Yeah,
it's kind of a rock and roll romance.
It was a really funny... It was a funny thing when we heard, I remember, I think I was with Brendan when we heard that you two had started dating.
Yeah.
And it was this really funny sense of like, I just remember us both being like, of course, of course they did. Of course they hit it off. Like, I wouldn't have thought of it on its own. But then when I heard, I was like, yeah, that is that is a perfect pairing. Like,
Yeah,
it's great.
Music brought us together, and plus Ash is so banging. You know, she's so hot. So
Oh my God.
I had to holler. No, I'm kidding. I'm not trying to objectify my wife.
No.
But I think it's funny to like have a romantic relationship with someone and then like be able to. This is gonna get me in trouble. If you can like keep keep being sassy with your partner and remind them that they're sexy and like.
I don't think there's anything wrong with thinking that your wife is very hot.
Okay, that's what's up.
I think that is more than appropriate.
So back to Dodie. Speaking of hot wives,
Yeah.
Dodie. No, so Dodie. So I feel like Dodie is the younger Gen X fans, and Wheatus is the older millennial fans.
That's probably true.
And so there's this generational divide.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it was really interesting to get to, you know, we had more, we kind of didn't know what was going to happen from Wheatus's perspective, opening for Mike in the States. And it was met more positively than we thought.
Yeah.
I would say, I'm speaking for the whole band here, but I think that was probably the general consensus, which was really interesting. And now we want to do more. I think we're going to do an American tour.
With Dodie?
No, not with him again. I think we're going to do something else in in this year. 2020 is the year now, and either do it as a headline or a co-headline with somebody else. And we want to just try and test that again. Prior to that tour with Mike, we had not toured America in like a decade, at least not coast to coast proper American tour. It was a really, really long time.
Were you were in a bus?
Yeah.
Okay, because I know y'all have the van with the beds.
I've toured America in that van with beds with Brendan a few times, but we stopped. I mean, shows were so hit and miss for us in America over the years. And by comparison, when we went to Europe or Australia or any of those places, they were so solid. And it was just, you know, both, I would say creatively and financially, it was just such a great vibe going to these other places. It was really hard to justify. It's like, well, why would we get in a van and do a show to fit, 10 people in Durham, North Carolina, when we can go to London and fill a room. So we kind of let that fade for a really, really long time. And right before we did the run with Mike, we did a headline show in Philly. Just kind of a random one. We got asked to play it. Have you ever done Milk Boy?
Yeah.
Great room, right?
Yeah. I'm playing there. I think I'm playing there next month with Schaefer.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm so glad I set you up for that plug.
Thank you.
And we got invited to do that show, and it was the first time in my experience with the band that we had a show in America that actually felt like a UK one, where people were really into it. We filled the room.
Right. They feed you there.
Yeah, exactly.
Shout out to Milk Boy.
Shout out to Milk Boy. Great venue. Love it. I can't wait to go back. But it really felt like a solid crowd. I'm going to sort of transition into another point here, but it was interesting talking about like in the past, saying how like people will tell you like your best days are behind you and you faded and stuff.
Right.
I've also, Brendan and I have talked a lot about some of my favorite acts are people who have been bands who are weird and who have existed sort of on the fringe for a long time.
The Eels.
Long enough. The Eels, Ween, They Might Be Giants, bands that have been around for so long. At a certain point, I feel like if you are an artist and you've been performing for 20 years,
right,
15 years, 30 years, whatever it is, at a certain point, it's almost like the world looks at you and they're like,
all right.
Well, they can't be terrible.
Right.
You, and it's true. Like you and I both know, it's like at a certain point, you actually can't fake it for that long. You have to have some merit. You have to have some fans. You have to have some ability to sustain yourself if you're going to do it for 20 years.
And if you're a quote unquote one hit wonder, you can't last if you don't have the chops and the passion.
Exactly.
And I would say that, people might want to use that paint Wheatus with those brushes, but that's not the whole thing. You guys have had a few hits and you've gone so far.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, it's funny. Last holiday season, I saw Weird Al and we were talking about like just the fact that sticking around, and he said how that was like a special thing when you can just keep going, where he's a total example of that. But we were laughing about how people come to, now I get this too. I wonder if you get it too. Kids will come to my show and they'll look like they're 40 and they'll have big beards and be drinking a beer and they'll be like, man, I first saw you when I was 5.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Longevity, that's like you see it and sometimes it doesn't feel like 15 years.
No.
But these kids are growing up.
Yeah. It's weird. Weird Al is another perfect example.
Yeah.
Like I remember when I first got into Weird Al, he was a joke. Like in the most genuine sense, like nobody took him seriously. He was.
What era are we talking?
Well, I first got into Weird Al at Bad Hair Day.
That's what's up.
Yeah. I got that CD as a gift when I finished the 4th grade.
Good job, man.
And that was a real life changer for me. But
God, that record's great.
oh my God, it's perfect. It's just perfect. But yeah, and now like you've seen it too. Like he has become a treasure, as he should be.
He's probably the most lauded American entertainer in music.
You'd be hard to think of someone who's more like universally beloved.
Who still tours.
Who still does it and does it successfully. Like seemingly like on a pretty large scale. Like, you know, he's manages to put on these really like outrageous shows. The tour that he did that was 2 years ago or a year ago, the Ill-Advised Vanity tour.
Oh, you went a few times, right?
I went twice.
That's what's up.
That was one of the most like heartwarming and what's the word? Like it was one of the most satisfying things to see someone like him doing a tour like that successfully, where he just like, I don't know. It felt like, even though it's not the ending, it felt like the most perfect, like happy ending to a music story I have ever seen in my life. I was moved, genuinely emotionally moved by that show.
And it's funny how, those songs hold up, the originals.
Yeah.
And so going back to the idea of being like a weird fringe act that lasts forever.
Yeah.
What do you think you guys got 20 more years?
20? Man, I don't know. You know, Brendan is,
how old's Brendan now? 40?
40. No, Brendan's 46.
So he's frontal age.
Yeah. So yeah, he and Damien are about the same age.
That's why they get along so well.
I can say Damien, right? That's all right.
Damien Hess.
Yes, they are about the same age. Brendan's 11 years older than me, so I've always sort of felt like it's on him. I don't know how long Brendan.
So he was younger than you when you started the band.
I know. I realized that somewhat recently. Like when I met Brendan, he was younger than me when I started the band, but now when I first started with the band, Brendan was younger than I am now, which is a weird.
That's crazy.
Weird thing to think about.
There's nothing and there's nothing wrong with being like a middle class nostalgia act who does his or their music for their living. I mean, that's actually that's like the perfect end game. What more do you want? Like there's a funny Spose lyric. They go, "How does it feel to be a one-hit wonder?" And he goes, "I don't know. How does it feel to have no hits?"
It's true. Yeah. It's really, really true. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think it's great. And I think he's in a kind of perfect position. At the same time, you know, at least for the last few years, and this is not trying to air Brendan's business too much, but, you know, that song generates enough for him that if he wanted to, he could stop and he'd
probably have more money.
He would definitely have more money. He could live off royalties and probably would do okay. Yeah. I mean, you know, maybe he could do some other but he could retire the brand Wheatus and he could do something else. And most of the money that he could probably sustain. You never know with that sort of thing. Like maybe it will eventually fade off and he won't get that kind of those checks as consistently, but he could, but he chooses not to. He would rather be broke investing every penny back into the band so that he can play and he can continue to make weird new records,
right? Which
I respect the hell out of that. I think that's like a really, you know, that says a lot. But at the same time, if at some point in the future he was like, you know what, I kind of need some time to just be chill and not be so like nonstop work all the time, I would be like, yeah, I totally get it.
You meet a lot of musicians in this industry and you meet a lot of performers, but you don't meet a lot of artists. Brendan is an artist.
Brendan is an artist. It's very, very true.
And because artists are uncompromising and like the quote unquote smart thing, an industry person would be like, Brendan, do an album with major chords, poppy lyrics, normal time signatures, do it in a week and recreate what was your formula. Mm-hmm. And he's like, nah, if anyone tells him that, nah, I'm going to produce it myself.
Yeah, he doesn't want to do that.
I'm going to record it through a phone or something like completely unconventional.
Yeah.
I'm going to have and then there's a thing where like he has you all used to do, you'd have to play the whole song start to finish, and then he'd do like 1,000 takes.
We did 2 records. Well, it's now like as a pair, Lightning and Jupiter, the 2 EPs, and those were recorded live in the studio. So we did
start to finish.
Yep. No overdubs, nothing like that.
Not the whole album, per track.
Per track. Yeah.
That's still impressive.
And that was like, we did each song like at least 100 times. Because we were also figuring out the arrangements as we went. Like we were kind of coming up with different parts, and there is something to be said for like when you play a song that many times. It's like when you do something live, you know, when you go on tour and you do a song over and over and over again, you discover new creative ground that you had never thought of before.
Right.
And that to make that happen in the studio is super cool. It's expensive and it takes a long time.
Were you recording out in Northport?
Yeah.
And so you had all y'all on salary or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, that man. He's generous.
Yeah, no, he is. Again, it goes back to the money thing. Like if he wanted to, he could live a much more comfortable life, but he would much rather pay every cent to pay for his musicians and his gear
and his tour bus
and his tour buses. Yeah, exactly. And all the expenses that go with it in order to do, and like
MC Lars opening
and MC Lars' opening slot and, all of that, and flying his gear. He won't use rented gear, so he flies his own equipment to the UK for an astronomical price because he doesn't want to have to plug into like a Marshall stack. He wants to have his own special guitar setup and all that stuff.
So when y'all opened for the Busted reunion at Wembley,
we did the Busted reunion tour. We did 18 arena shows. One of them was at Wembley. Yeah, and we did 2 nights at the O2 in London.
That must have been like such a great redemption for y'all, but especially Brendan, like having fought tooth and nail and then now being remembered and lauded by this legendary band. And he's kind of been a mentor to James Bourne in a way.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
For sure. It was a really incredible opportunity and a genuine, you know, because Wheatus has fallen off the radar in a way. Like we've actually managed to battle against this for years, but for a long time, the biggest problem we had over there is like, it seemed like every single time we toured, after every show, at least one person would come up to us and be like, I didn't know you guys were still a band. And we have never not been a band, but when you don't have radio singles and you don't have that kind of play as much and you're independent,
right.
You don't have a PR campaign constantly reminding people,
right.
People just don't notice and they think you're gone.
I get that comment too. Oh, MC Lars is still going.
Still going.
I hate when people say that, but also I'm like, well, at least you heard of me.
Exactly. So
it's not a nice thing to say to someone who hasn't had a hit recently.
I think it feels more loaded to us than it actually probably is to them.
Oh, you guys still exist? Yeah. What did we think we went on hiatus?
But for us to do a tour of that level with that amount of attention was huge because it did remind people, and we were able to get up there and, you know, we did a short set. We did 6 songs, but we were able to do a handful of new ones that went over really well. And
then I bet that helped your guys' numbers on return.
It did. I mean, it was fascinating to see, like, to play those huge arena shows, you know, where we're playing to like, you know, 20,000 people a night. And then actually when you do that level of show, you can look at Spotify and you can actually see the numbers of like, we did 1 track from the most recent like LP we did, and that song instantly became the most played.
What was the song?
14. And it was crazy. Yeah. It's just a bizarre thing you do realize that like it's so obvious, but it's true. Like if the song is good and you play it for enough people, they will actually, it will catch a little bit.
I mean, imagine that. It's just it's cool. Using that to leverage your new stuff.
Yeah.
But this is like an unparalleled feeling, and I've never had this feeling at this level. Playing a song for 20,000 people that everyone knows, everyone adores, and they have an emotional connection to it and are reminded of a certain moment of their life. Like that song for me, my first girlfriend and I in high school, it was like one of our songs. Because one of our first times we hung out, we went to a concert and like, it was like this whole thing. Anyway, that song is like a moment in everyone's life. And to have 20,000 people singing along, I mean, it must be one that, as a musician, even though you didn't write it, it must be like one of the most amazing feelings.
It's very surreal. You know, it's funny. I've had this experience with like, it's such a great, reminder as a musician, primarily, like I've done a little bit of like my own, writing and recording over the years with a few people, but generally speaking, I am a player. And
true player.
A true player. I really walked into that.
Wait,
one.
the Ventura Project.
Yeah. I have a band with
You and
my
your
wife
wife.
Joey, who's also in Wheatus. And, but beyond that, like the power of playing a song that people love is wild. It's really incredible. And I've had that,
It's like probably better than any drugs.
Better
than
my
heroin.
experience, like for me, again, as a musician, like
I don't know if you've ever done any drugs, but anyway,
I've done never heroin, so I can't compare it to heroin. But for me, like being on stage in those moments is like the greatest. It's the best feelings of my life are in those moments, being on stage and having those experiences. What I was going to say is, playing Teenage Dirtbag in front of 20,000 people is amazing. It's also amazing to me. I got asked to fill in. It's the last show I did last year where I sat in and played bass for a tribute to Dolly Parton. That
I did not know you did this.
Yeah. It was at the Bell House in the end of December, and it was great. Super good bands, and they have built up quite a nice following for themselves. It was packed out at the Bell House, a few hundred people, and we did "I Will Always Love You" by Dolly, and to play that song on a stage for an audience like that, sometimes you don't realize. I mean, this is why people go to concerts as well.
Right.
But the power of a song, of that level of a song, is completely overwhelming. To perform it and to feel like you have that kind of a response from a crowd back to you.
Yeah.
Whether it's Teenage Dirtbag, which again I didn't write, but I feel very connected to, or I Will Always Love You, which I don't have any connection to other than the fact that I think it's a great song. The power of that moment is so incredibly intoxicating, and truly is why I do what I do,
Yeah, I mean, that Cobain talks about in his journals how playing music live, and this is even when Nirvana was getting started, it's the most addictive thing. And here's a guy who had his knowing about drugs, right?
Yeah.
Most addictive thing, and as much as a power exchange of energy as sex, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that on a new level, because it's spiritual, and it's this interesting dichotomy because most people don't care about music. Like people care. I'm sorry, most songs that get written, no one ever hears.
Yes.
If you were to look at every song, but there are these magic transcendent songs which define eras and pop up. And I think as musicians, we chase that, and kind of like actors chase the moment where they can do the perfect Hamlet or whatever. There's like talking about, I don't know, we're part of this tradition that's much older than us and will be here long after us. And the fact that we've all met in this scene and gotten to travel the world and stuff, it's such a blessing, man.
It really is, yeah.
And our friendship's a blessing.
It is. We've had so much fun. I actually have to say, because I thought of this the other day when I was thinking about seeing you for this.
Yeah.
When I joined Wheatus when I was young. I was 19 years old when I left college to do it. And in those times, I had a real, which I think a lot of people deal with, and I still do sometimes, but a real feeling of imposter syndrome, where I was so concerned. I was like, oh my God, at a certain point, someone's going to realize that I don't belong here,
right?
And that this is not where I should be. I'm not a professional. I'm not qualified. All these people are professionals, and I'm not. And they're going to find out, and I'm going to be out of here.
I feel that every day, Matt. I
still do. I've gotten at more peace with it over the last few years, but it was really, really rough back then. And you were the first person to hire me to play after Wheatus. We did that tour together,
right?
Where I played bass for you, but as a part of Wheatus, we backed you up. But then after that, we still continued to play together, and you called me in, and I played with you and
was it John
and John Longley and Mike Russo, and we did a handful of shows.
We opened for T-Pain, right?
We opened for T-Pain. And we did, a handful. And that was, you were the first person to call me and ask me to play.
Really?
Just outside, completely outside of Wheatus. And that was, at the time, one of the most validating and, important things for me, growing as a musician.
That's dope.
So thank you.
Hey, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing that I love about playing shows with you. that you're different than other artists. You are ready. Whenever you come to a practice, you know the songs, and it's never you that we have to redo parts for, because you put your time into it, and you have like, I think like, I was going to say like a savant kind of memory, but savant maybe has some pejorative implications, but you have this memory for scales and notes that I don't have. Like I have to, if I'm going to play Robot Kills on guitar, I have to practice that all day, even though I played that song forever.
Yeah.
You just have this ability to learn songs, and maybe that's sight reading with Gaga that taught you that or something. But how do would you agree that your memory skills are better than most people?
I think it's actually one of the luckier qualities that I have. I say lucky only because it's not something I really ever worked on. I just have had that ability where I'm very good at like I can learn something and remember it pretty quickly and pretty immediately. And it does lock in. Like right now, I mean, I would need like a moment, but I could probably remember most of your set fairly quick. And we haven't played together in maybe 2 years now.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, no, I have a pretty solid memory for music. Like if I listen to a song and I have it like under my fingers, it kind of just stays there. That Matt is why you get to tour with Dodie and Damien and everyone else. You know, I mean, it's like what is the Peter principle? You rise to your highest level of incompetence. Have you heard that phrase? No, I haven't.
So it's like,
I really like that though.
You won't be promoted more than you're capable for.
Yeah.
So this imposter thing, that's interesting because you're able to prove that you could keep going. And also, you're easy to get along with on tour. I think people who are, I don't know, I found that people who are difficult or demanding or diva-esque, you don't hire again.
No.
You know, I've had people who are difficult on the road and I don't tour with them anymore.
Yeah, no, it's very true. It's very true. I try to be. I mean, I've gotten very lucky. I've toured with a lot of people over the years, and with very, very few exceptions, I have gotten along really well with everybody. Like I feel like I've gotten very lucky that I've worked with really great groups of people, and nobody who really was like a problem or too much of a diva or like a partier or anything like that, you know?
That's great, Matt. So Matt, you know a lot about music subgenres. You are like encyclopedic, and you have one of the biggest vinyl collections of all time. Do you still have all that vinyl?
I have a lot of vinyl. I did downsize a tiny bit. I moved to Joey and I moved to Astoria like 2 years ago from Greenpoint.
Yeah.
And I had to downsize a little bit just to fit everything into the spot. But I don't know how many, but definitely in the thousands of records.
In the thousands? Is it insured?
Yeah.
You have renter's insurance?
Yeah, I have insurance on the house that I've definitely factored that in.
I remember when I sublet your room for you when you were on the road.
Yeah.
I was like, there's so much vinyl. I was like afraid. I didn't touch it because I knew it was like
you could have touched
precious things. But you know a lot about subgenres and musical history. Let's talk a little bit about black metal.
Okay.
So what do you know about black metal?
I know a bit. Well, we're talking about like the original like Norwegian black metal, like the true
Norwegian
like
black
Burzum
metal.
and
Mayhem.
And Mayhem, yeah, sure. Lords of Chaos.
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about Lords of Chaos, and I bring it up because that's how bands are not supposed to treat each other.
Yeah, that's a great example. I mean, it's an amazing. I think it's such a crazy story of all those bands, and we can't even tell the whole story here, but
real brief, let's do it.
The story of Lords of Chaos with Mayhem.
Yeah.
So basically, the original like black metal scene out of Norway was these bunch of bands who were all sort of competing for being the most legit and satanic and horrible black metal.
And they felt like the bands like Sepultura wore cargo shorts and therefore were not real metal.
Exactly, yeah. These guys were real metal, and to prove that they were real metal, they would actually go out and burn churches and attack people, and it was like a real incredibly...
Kill people in parks.
Yes, exactly. It was no joke. Like it was crime.
Stuff that you probably shouldn't do.
Yes. And
and also, I want to say, in Scandinavia, the churches are stave churches, meaning they're like these ancient wooden churches as opposed to like the Catholic churches. And so it's this idea of we're reclaiming our pagan roots by destroying the hegemonic like power of the Christianity in Scandinavia.
Yes.
So we're going to burn down these wooden churches.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it came to a head where two members of the community, one was Varg Vikernes, murdered. It was Euronymous, right?
Yeah.
He murdered Euronymous in a fight that they were having over. I don't even remember what the argument was about. It was, again, just like all rooted in kind of cred, right?
Euronymous had released Burzum solo records, and he felt like he owed him more money.
That's right.
And so there was this kind of schism where Hieronymus was saying, "Oh, I'm going to kill Burzum. I have all these plans, blah, blah, blah," or Varg. But originally, the original singer of Mayhem had shot himself in the face, and
they used that picture for their live record.
Yeah, for their live bootleg. And Hieronymus walked in and then rearranged the pieces and took the pictures before calling the police.
He also didn't he take a piece of his skull and made a necklace out of it?
Yeah, so that's what's up.
It's such a crazy story, and it's when you hear it, it just seems really like kind of cool and unbelievable, but also it is horrifying. It is absolutely horrifying.
Yeah.
And Varg is out of prison now, right? Isn't he?
Yeah, and he just got shut down on YouTube for having these kind of a racist YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So he's not necessarily a person that, you'd want to be friends with.
No, probably not.
Because he killed his bandmate. He stabbed him to death. He did racist YouTube videos. But, one of their first album is Tolkien themed.
Yeah.
That doesn't forgive him.
No, it doesn't.
The song about the song Dunkelheit or whatever is about the Eye of Sauron from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
That's what's up.
Those records are like, again, I hesitate to praise it too heavily based on all of the things we were saying. But if you want to talk about iconic music from an era and genre-defying music,
right?
Those Burzum records, Mayhem, like that scene, it is so incredibly specific and unique to them, like really kind of lo-fi. Like they obviously didn't have a whole lot of money for their recording, so they kind of sound terrible, but very unique. Like this, like incredibly loud, nasty metal music. Recorded very lo-fi and very DIY.
That's kind of what's cool about it.
Oh, it's so cool.
I would say Burzum has better melodies than Mayhem. Yeah, I said it.
I think that's fair.
But I only, I'm not trying to say that this stuff is super melodic. I mean, they're not going to be doing Hanson covers for their Patreon.
Ooh. That's a Patreon I would sign up for.
Burzum. Yeah, here's the thing. When I play, I feel weird about listening to Burzum on Spotify because he gets a fraction of a penny, but he lives in this farm in France with his kids, and he doesn't vaccinate them, and he and his wife are a little bit. Gosh, I wonder if any Burzum fans are listening, but they're a little.
Probably some.
They're a little. They're. When that guy who massacred all those people in Finland or whatever at the summer camp, he sent all these manifestos, and one he sent to Varg.
Right.
He's like part of the the clique of people who aren't necessarily like SJWs.
Yeah. This is a whole like incredibly long conversation I've had with people over the last
like, can you bump R. Kelly? Can you bump Michael Jackson?
Exactly, which is this is really simplifying it and doing it very quickly. I sort of believe that it's up to the listener to make that call. Like, right. I don't think there's a sweeping judgment you can make in that regard. I think if you go back through history, it's very hard now. So like right now, I think for most people, the idea of like really like getting into an R. Kelly track is problematic and difficult, as it should be. There's a lot there. It's really hard to think about. At the same time, you go back through history and you find there are so many people, so many artists who we revere.
Poe,
who had tremendous problematic history. You can go back.
Jerry Lewis.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is
Woody Allen.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, Woody Allen is still sort of being debated, but yeah, absolutely.
OJ.
I think the lesson the lesson I take from it, and this is like as positive a spin as you can possibly put on all of this behavior,
right,
is that the art is ultimately bigger than the person. Like when someone makes something truly iconic, is someone is able to create timeless art that will actually live on beyond their failings and their transgressions as a human being.
Right.
And it takes a long time. You go back and look at the history of like Miles Davis.
He did a lot of heroin.
Not a nice guy.
Was he not nice to women?
No, he was not nice to women. Or even, like John Lennon, another great example. John Lennon had so many. You could go back and
Led Zeppelin.
Yeah. Oh my God. And
because back then you couldn't. It was harder to. You couldn't go to Twitter and be like, John Bonham did this to me.
It was harder, but at the same time, like, people did know. It's not like it was a total secret that these things were going on.
Right.
I think people are definitely more, let's not use the word woke, but people are more aware of these things now, and that's good. We should be. We should absolutely be aware, and we should hold people to a higher standard. I'm 100% in favor of that. But I do think it's interesting just to see how people get torn down, but then the art somehow, like, it just after enough time, suddenly it's just only about what they created.
Right.
And you don't really talk about the person so much anymore. It's just about what they made while they were alive.
You know, think about, Matt, is like we're in a new world where, like we said earlier, like institutions are crumbling and different archetypes are being reinvented. And I think this whole like patriarchal, you know, you collect like this rock star thing is, oh, you're supposed to be really promiscuous and objectify women and stuff. That is like a hangover from like the Guns N' Roses old world. And I feel like musicians are more aware that that's not how you're supposed to act, and that doesn't define your success or mean that you're successful.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true.
That's a good lesson I think people have gotten like woken up to, so to speak.
I think that's
men and women.
Yeah, absolutely, men and women. Again, I think that, you know, holding ourselves to a higher standard is extremely important, and we absolutely should. But I agree. I think the expectation of like what's going to happen in the music world, the idea that it's just going to be like, you know, drug fueled parties and, you know, drunken blackouts and groupies and all that kind of stuff. That is not, I could just be talking now and reflecting the circles that I am in. That's entirely possible. But I do think expectations have shifted, and that's a good thing. And
if you act like that, it's like an okay boomer kind of thing. Like, you feel if someone's talking about women that way or acting that way or whatever, then you're like, it becomes this thing of like, oh, you haven't gotten the memo that it's not
exactly.
1998.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It sort of just it comes across. I've met one or two people in the music world who have acted that way and who have said things where I've just been like, oh, I almost just feel bad for them. I'm like, oh man, this is not,
it's not
you think this is what you're supposed to do, and you're just wrong. Like, you have not gotten the memo that this is not how it works anymore, and you're gonna find out very quickly.
Yeah, and that's good. I think that's what,
absolutely,
being in the industry for all these decades, you start to see trends and shifts. And I always love to hear like young musicians' takes on things. And I always liked how, even though like how old are you? 30?
I'm 33. I'm almost 34.
So I always felt like I always loved, and I still do, your perspective, because I'm a few years older than you.
Yeah.
And like being around young musicians and people with fresh perspective is really good. And I think that's something that jobs like teaching, being a mentor to people, doing music, like all these things provide that opportunity. You know? And
absolutely.
I feel like you probably with Brendan gave Wheatus all this life because you help with their social media and the crowdfunding stuff, and like you maintain a lot of the quote unquote millennial things that Brendan maybe is a little slower to get on top of.
Yeah. I think it definitely does help. I think just by default, you have a different perspective when you come from a different generation, which I do. It's been wild lately, like the times that we've been working with Madden on the drums. She is 20. And so that's like a whole other perspective. It's been fascinating.
She's younger than the hit song.
She's younger than the song. We noted that when we did, she also played drums for Dodie. The two of us did those tours together. And she is, was it 6 years younger, or like between 5 and 6 years younger than the record we were playing the anniversary for.
Wow.
Which was
that's kind of
crazy.
The songs live on. Who would have thought?
Absolutely crazy. Yeah, no, exactly. And, but yeah, having that perspective is really fascinating, and hearing the things that she was identifying with and going back and like rediscovering music, like what resonated with her as opposed to what resonated with me is really fascinating. Like, she was really into, loves a lot of like 90s sort of like grunge and sort of like angular rock stuff, which honestly was actually never really my thing. Like, I've always felt like I missed that world.
Like what? Like the Pearl Jam stuff, or
like,
even more
like
underground?
Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Stone Temple Pilots, Alice in Chains, stuff like that. I always felt like I appreciated it, but it never really like resonated with me. You know, I never like just loved it.
Interesting.
And
you're always like, never mind. No, no.
And I always just thought like, oh, that's just like, I'm not the right time. Like, I'm not the right age. Like the age when I was getting into music, that just was not.
That was passé.
It was passé at the time. Like when I was getting into music was kind of like, I guess what's now considered one of the golden ages of pop punk, where it was like Blink and Green Day and Newfound Glory and all of those bands.
Wheatus.
And Wheatus. Yeah, it's true. And all of those bands were like having their moments. And that was what got me into playing. And at the time, listening to that sort of thing, then you go back and you listen to Soundgarden. It just felt so like drab and just like,
yeah,
it was dark and like downer and just not fun.
But it's funny, man. So I want to say two things about that. It's interesting. Like her Nirvana chronologically would be like our Zeppelin. It's a classic, the last classic rock, classic music. And the other thing that's interesting about Nirvana is that if you look at Kurt's influence, they really came from a punk hardcore background, but loved stuff like the Beatles. So in a way, Nirvana was the first pop punk band. You could paint that with a brush.
Very true.
That's what made them different than those other bands, I guess.
It is, yeah. Well, I think it's what made them more popular than so many of their peers at the time, because they were making records, like you go back now, and I would highly recommend, if people don't know, like go back and listen to other bands of that era, like the Pixies and the Jesus Lizard and Mudhoney. So many of those bands are amazing, but did not have the pop sensibility that Nirvana did.
The melodies.
Being able to write like a catchy, hooky song. His willingness to do that was what took that sound and brought it to that level.
And his inability not to do that too, right?
True,
the fact that like there's really only 3 real Nirvana records and they all have really clear melodies.
They do, yeah.
And that's tight. So my last question for you.
Oh, yeah.
Matthew Milligan.
Sure.
What is your favorite record of all time?
Oh, no. My favorite record of all time.
What a question.
That's such a tough question.
People don't like being asked this, I think.
Well, it would be really hard.
You can say you don't have one.
No, I'm going to say the first thing that popped into my mind. And the first thing that popped into my mind is Revolver by the Beatles.
Oh.
But I mean,
that's Chuck D's favorite Beatles record.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
It's funny because I was just going to say, like, if you asked me, like, favorite record of all time is one thing, but then to say, like, oh, what's your favorite hip hop record? Even if you said, what's your favorite rock record, I would probably not have even thought of Revolver. Because I almost don't think of that as a rock record, even though it is. But it's so, like.
Didn't they record that before the last record? Or I'm sorry, obviously. Didn't they record it last, but it got released before?
Abbey Road is what you're thinking of. They recorded Abbey Road was the last thing they recorded, but after Abbey Road came out, they released Let It Be.
Which they'd recorded before.
But they didn't want to come out. They didn't like it.
They didn't, and that was with the guy who shot his wife.
Phil Spector.
Yeah, or his girlfriend.
Yes.
Allegedly.
Is
he canceled? I don't know.
Phil Spector. He's in prison, right?
So his production career is canceled.
He's not doing any current work.
But if you've done, what was the last album? Yesterday or Let It Be?
The last proper record they made was
Abbey Road.
Yes, but the last full album that got released was Let It Be.
So why did they eventually release it?
It was just the label, I think. I mean, imagine being the label that had the Beatles signed, and they were like, "Well, we're done," and they had one unreleased record. They're like, "Well, we're good. We're not going to not release this. The biggest band in the world.
Yeah,
we're not. They couldn't stop them. So
they couldn't. They didn't have much negotiating power.
Yeah. But I've always loved the fact that that's true because Let It Be is often considered a bit of a shakier record for them. So
does it have the song Let It Be on there?
It does. But as an album, it's not quite as Abbey Road is often considered one of their best records. And I've heard people say oh yeah, well Let It Be, you could tell they were about to break up because it's not quite as solid. But Abbey Road was actually the last thing they made.
Actually,
it's
interesting.
Pretty much flawless.
So let's talk about the main Beatles records in
yes,
order. So there's the Meet the Beatles and all the older stuff.
Well, I was going to say we can talk about the British records or the American records.
Let's talk about the canon and where to start without getting too confusing. Let's go backwards. Abbey Road was their last one.
Yes.
Then did they record Let It Be?
They recorded Let It Be before Abbey Road.
And then Revolver?
No, but after that, before that was the White Album.
And that
doing it backwards is really challenging.
And the White Album, it's like having to do the alphabet backwards when you get pulled over.
Yeah.
That White Album, not that that's ever happened. The White Album and is the one where they did all like the tape and 4-track experimentations.
They did a lot of that on the White Album. Yeah, exactly.
Before that, Sgt. Pepper's?
Before White Album was Magical Mystery Tour.
Oh, yeah.
Which
is kind of like,
Magical Mystery Tour is definitely also hit and miss. They say that was the one that they had the least guidance on. George Martin, the producer, was around less in the making of that record, and he was really good at like reining them in when they were.
It's like Eminem after Dre,
exactly,
hit or miss,
exactly.
And then before that, well, you probably know.
And then before Magical Mystery was Sgt. Pepper.
Oh.
And then,
so they did 2 albums of like...
God, I hope I'm doing this right. I'm very sorry if I do this wrong.
There's 2 albums where they're like, let's speak other characters and let's be like magical, fun little fairy guys.
Yeah,
Like, not, don't be like fairy like that. I mean like magical fantasy land. Let's dress up like little sergeants with our little coats. Or let's dress up like crazy wild animals. We'll go to Magic Land.
I think...
then Yellow Submarine was before that.
Oh, So I forgot. Yellow Submarine is in there.
Is that an album or just a song?
I guess it technically counts as a record, but it was like the soundtrack to the movie. There's a couple songs on there that were unreleased or were singles that they threw on the record. So Yellow Submarine, if we count that as a record,
B-sides comp
would have fallen around the Let It Be era, before Abbey Road as well.
Oh, so that was towards the end. Did that have Octopus's Garden?
Octopus's Garden is on... Ooh, God. Is it on... No, that's on Abbey Road.
Okay, that's what's up. Classic.
Yeah.
So, going back, so confusing.
Sgt. Pepper, and then before that is Revolver.
And before that...
Rubber Soul.
Oh, and Rubber Soul's like the American debut. No?
Rubber Soul was the... No, it wasn't the American debut.
That's where the British and the U.S. albums
That's
link?
where they start to link up. Yeah, exactly.
So
if you go before that, then it gets confusing because then it's...
Before that's Elvis covers. Really.
Yeah, the American records were like Meet the Beatles and Hard Day's Night and Help and all that kind of stuff. But then in the UK, it was
Help.
Yeah.
Oh, that's before that.
Help was from the earlier days. Rubber Soul is kind of like the marker, I think, for most people. Like that's the start of the second age of the Beatles.
Okay,
like
and that had a lot
of got much more
bounce to the ounce. Hey, something I did on the last tour? I had this long drive. A few years ago, maybe 20 years ago, Capitol released this the Beatles anthologies.
Yeah,
if you listen to those back to back, it's awesome because it really shows how like raw their musicianship was.
Yeah,
and their commentary, it's awesome.
They had, it's a great thing to talk about. Is just the fact that like before the Beatles got signed and before they became the Beatles, they played together just as musicians doing cover songs. They would do Chuck Berry covers and
Elvis
Presley and Buddy Holly.
Yeah.
And they just played.
In Munich or no, Frankfurt? Hamburg.
And they played, they must have clocked thousands of hours of playtime before they ever got signed or wrote a song of their own. And it's one of those things that's like, one of my favorite things about the Beatles' career is that it happened so fast. They made so much music in like 9 years. They were only a band for 9 years.
Wow.
And in that amount of time, they released, what's the total count on records? Like maybe 12. And they're like, almost all like just flawless examples, like some of the perfect pop songwriting and recording ever made. And it seems like, wow, how did they do that so fast? But a huge part of it was they clocked so much time. Like they were so ready. When they got signed and they were like, well, you get to make a record, they could not have been. They were like, we have been waiting for this moment for years and we are like here to do it. And
so despite the talent and the preparation, there's also the historical elements of being this post-World War II creation where everyone's like the fusion of cultures and prosperity and joy. They manifested that. And being a port city, so the influence of music like blues and skiffle music and all this stuff came into Liverpool. And so it had this unique amalgamation of cultures that led them to define the 20th century popular music arc. So it's a very appropriate band.
Well said.
Do you want to know my favorite record?
Tell me.
Great Milenko.
Great Milenko, your favorite record of all time?
Oh, yeah. It's a little problematic. And, you can't bump in the whip on the way to the Women's March. But it's great.
I really love the fact, this is another great, I love the fact that ICP has had something of a resurgence. Another good example of the thing we were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, the Miracles thing 11 years ago now.
11 years
Even
ago.
though that song came out in 2008, it was the Saturday Night Live thing like 2009, 2010. And the fact that, did you know we played The Gathering? I told you that.
You did.
Meg Ryan and I.
You did.
And the fact that, they know that their biggest years are behind them,
sure,
obviously. But, they'd be getting those checks.
Absolutely.
And that record holds up because it has features by Slash from Guns N' Roses, Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols, Alex Cooper, produced by Mikey Clark, who did most of the great ICP production. And that album is, from start to finish, there's not a bad song on it.
I think that they're another great example of a band that has been around for long enough now that I'm starting to see the pendulum swing. Like, they were a joke.
That was the name of their comic book, The Pendulum?
Really?
Came with an album.
I know all the deep ICP
so
references.
Poetic.
I'm seeing it like kind of, swing back around, and I think people are starting to treat them with respect because, again, truly, like, you can't, I really believe it. Like, if you want to do something, especially in any art, if you want to do something that's different, that's like left of center and is not, you're not going to be the person who's, you're not striving to be the next Lady Gaga or the next
John Lennon. Well, he was kind of non-conventional.
Sure, but anyone who's like just going for like top 40 radio.
Oh, for now.
For now. Like,
yeah.
If you don't want to do that, if you want to do your own weird thing,
yeah.
If you find something that is great, that you really, really love,
yeah, and
you just do it, and you get, like, you're going to keep getting better at it the longer you do it, right? Just
right.
You keep working at it, you're just going to get better and better and better. And at a certain point, if you can do it for long enough, it's almost like people can't deny what you're doing. Right.
It's attrition, right?
Exactly. You're going to, you can just beat people into submission in a way. It's like, at a certain point, it's like, well, God, I guess... Yeah,
I guess
something has to be to this, because if there wasn't, ICP would not be doing The Gathering every year for how long?
They just did their 20th.
Yeah.
And it's also like, and it means, you figure out a way to either through your own financial savvy or through investors maintain this.
Yeah.
And it's also like in all these subgenres, there are all these ways you can prove yourself. So like with ICP, they sign artists, and one of the ways that they make sure the artists are like good enough, they do versions of the characters and songs from the Dark Carnival in their own style. So for instance, Ouija Mac did a version of The Dead Body Man, which is a song from Terror Wheel, which was their first radio hit. He did a version called The Dead Body Man 3, where he did like kind of like a SoundCloud post millennial version of that. And so it's like how you manifest, it's like being able to play a blues scale, right? Uh-huh. Being able to do something bigger. It's like the subgenre then creates subgenres within itself.
Sure.
Or so like in nerdcore, the way to show like how good a nerdcore rapper are you is like, how good is his Star Wars song? How deep is he with his or she with their references? You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. So in ICP, when someone does one of those tracks, do they use the same beat? Is it like a new verse over the same, is it like a mixtape style?
It's often like a remix of the beat or sampling the other beat.
Right.
Like Big Hoodoo, he's their rapper from like Southwest Detroit who's like a witch doctor kind of character.
I love it.
And he has there's a song called Southwest Voodoo on Great Malenko, and so one of Hoodoo's best songs is a sample from that. So instead of the hook from Southwest Voodoo is voodoo running from my magic, so they go hoodoo running from my magic. So if you listen to the ICP's other artists, you see how they fit into that category. And the reason I mentioned the Star Wars thing is like, that's how we started the conversation.
Yeah.
If you can, the greatest gift is to stick around long enough where you can influence other generations, subgenres, people emulate you, and you can foster other careers. That is like the beauty and the best thing about the music industry. And Wheatus has done that with so many acts, myself included, where using the success of the project, you guys have fostered all this new music. And late Cambrian, right? Another example.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's been a
Damien. I mean, he wouldn't have ever left the U.S. otherwise.
Yeah, we brought MC Frontalot to the UK for the first time.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we've gotten really lucky. Who else? Matt the Band,
Handjob Academy.
Busted. Busted. We really helped them a lot. Cornmo. We brought Cornmo to the UK and did a tour. You were on that tour, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a good
2012.
time. Right. Wow. Yeah, no, that's a real, like, if you're in a position to do that as a band, getting to share music you love with your fans is
Other bands you love.
Yeah, other bands that you love, like an artist that we are a huge fan of, to like bring them out and be like, before you see us, we want you to check out these great artists. Like, that's a real treat.
And stylistically, being this band that bridged these eras, it seems like every pop band tries to do a Teenage Dirtbag kind of song, whether consciously or not. This idea of like the big chorus, nostalgia about being younger, right? You hear that in like Weezer's Beverly Hills, even. It's like people kind of, I don't know. That song has been emulated and inspired so many people, and you're part of its living history, Matt.
Yeah. No, it's a trip. It's a really wild, it's a wild experience. It continues to be. It has been for a long time, and it still is.
And I'm glad we're friends.
Yeah, I am too, man.
So let's play the Hanson cover.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Let's plug your personal social media.
Sure. I am on Instagram at Millie Milligan, MILLIGAN.
And you do a thing like in October, you watch a horror movie every day and review it on Instagram?
I was doing the 31 Days of Horror in October. I did that 2 years in a row. I'm actually considering doing something different this year and just like having a list of like every movie I watch all year. I won't plug that
every
on my
day?
Instagram the same way. Not every day, because
Are you on Letterboxd?
That's exactly what I think I'm going to do, is set up a
Are you on there?
letterbox. Yeah.
Okay, we got to be friends.
Set up a letterbox and do like every movie that I see all year, and talk about ones that are my favorites.
Or no, what you could do now is October, do a review of every ICP protege and which dark carnival tropes they use. Oh, I should do that. Matt, and then what are you on Twitter?
Same. At Millie Milligan on Twitter, and I guess my website is matthew-milligan.com, and that has like the list of shows that I do. I play with, obviously, Wheatus all the time, Mike Doty pretty regularly, but I also play with all sorts of people. I have a show with Joey Slater, my wife. She has a new record, and we're doing a show at Knitting Factory at the end of this month, and then my band Grim All Day is doing a show. I'm always doing something, so if you ever want to like come find me, you can. That's probably the best way.
And I would say if anyone's looking for a professional touring artist, Matt's schedule is pretty busy, but I'm just saying, if
my schedule is busy, but also I always want to do everything.
Yeah,
I love.
That's why you're success.
I love playing with. A friend of mine told me this a few years ago, and it's my favorite piece of musician advice I have ever gotten, which is. If you're a musician, if you're listening to this and you're a musician trying to like figure out how to do it, there's a lot of different approaches and different pieces of advice on how to make a living, how to get paid. Like, there's so much work that's available to you that someone doesn't have a budget to pay you to play on, that kind of thing. And someone told me that the rule of thumb should always be, if you love the music and you love the people, do it. And that attitude will always lead you down the right path to more good people and more good music. And eventually, even if not on that, the number of times I've done a gig where I didn't get paid because I loved the person and I loved what they were doing, that then eventually led to work where I made a lot of money or a good amount of money. Is I couldn't even tell you how many times that has happened. I think that for me, moving forward, always, that's the thing I think about. If somebody wants to offer me something like, oh, can you do this, but I can only pay you a few bucks, whatever it is. Like, you know what? I think this music's dope. I really like this person. Sure, I'll do it.
And being able to have your business right so you can take opportunities like that.
Exactly.
So any young musicians, whatever, being able to have that side hustle or
obviously,
something.
I'm not like, if you have a touring opportunity, you can't turn that down. Like, you can't turn down money for those sorts of things. But as a rule, there's, usually when you do this, there's plenty of time where you're not working. And if you have that freedom in your schedule where you're able to say yes to those sorts of things, do it. And then the idea is supposed to be that if at a certain point you're not happy with it anymore and you don't like it, then don't do it.
Right. Especially and then it only becomes a problem when you're getting paid a ton if you don't love it. But then that's a good problem to have.
If you're getting paid a ton of money and you are not loving what you do, I would say that is a good problem to have. But then, you start again searching for the gig that has the music you love and the people you love. And
Matt, that attitude, everyone I've rehired for projects, people who've been working with me since the beginning from the ground floor.
Yeah.
Those are the people that I've rehired. who have a good attitude, who aren't salty on the road about needing more right when you've already paid them. Like,
Yep.
And that's how you get ahead in the industry. And it's kind of interesting. Like being a good person, actually, and being an easy to work with person means for longevity means as much as your talent, probably more.
Yeah,
because I'd rather have someone who's a okay guitarist who's really awesome than like Slash being. I'm not saying maybe Slash would be fun, but someone who's like real diva.
The reality is there is no shortage of great musicians.
Right.
There's really not. The thing that can set you apart is being someone who is chill and cool to hang out with, and also like willing to like meet you halfway and understand, like artists 9 times out of 10. This is another thing I've seen people do that I always think is a mistake, is like someone wants you to do a gig and you want to do it, but then you try to like squeeze as much money out of that single gig as you possibly can. Like that might work for the one-off gig, but that person probably will not call you again.
Right.
And I would much rather, like, if someone wants me to play and they're like, ooh, I would love for you to be on it, but money's tight and I can only pay you, whatever small amount of money it is for this show. Be like, okay, that's cool. That's fine. I'll do it this time. No sweat. And that person will call you again. They're going to want to work with you again.
Yeah.
And not because I'm not saying get taken advantage of. This is always a fine line here,
right.
but being willing to, most artists, most songwriters, or whoever you're working with are not loaded. No. They're not rich. And if they're hiring musicians, it is at a great loss almost every single time.
Right.
So creating those relationships with those people where you feel like you're on the same team, that's huge.
Yeah. And that's true, Matt. That's right? Important. And you guys are maybe touring more this year, Wheatus.com?
It looks like Wheatus, Wheatus.com. It looks like Wheatus is going to do America, Europe, and Australia.
Oh, shoot.
In 2020. We have...
That's awesome.
It would be too soon for me to say specifics, but basically...
Like mainland Europe, too?
I hope so, yeah.
How's it been with the pound being, like, non-existent? That's horrible.
It's been stressful.
Brandon should go on UK TV and publicly comment on it.
Oh, good idea. Maybe we'll go back just so he can talk on TV.
What is it now, like $1 to the pound almost?
I actually don't know, because it's been moving so wildly. Like, it's been changing a lot.
Do you think it will go back to $2 a pound?
Oh, probably not. Not anytime soon. But it's. I mean, oh my God, what a can of worms to open. But like, yeah, who knows what the Brexit thing will actually mean for us? Because we used to, like, if you were a touring act, you could go to the UK, and then you could also tour around Europe.
Yeah,
and there was no problem with that. You didn't even have to, like, they would check your passport, but you didn't need separate visas.
Right.
You didn't need any of that kind of stuff, and that might be about to change. So
wow, and it's already a big to get into the UK. Is the work permits? They're very Procrustean. They're very like draconian,
yes.
It's so difficult, and it's expensive to buy the work permits. Like, I had a friend who went to do a tour over there back in the MySpace days, and he landed, and they went on his MySpace page and saw his tour dates. They just looked him up. He didn't have a work permit. Sent him on a plane.
Sent him home. Yeah, I had that happen to somebody at the Canadian border. A friend of mine.
That's not fresh.
Yeah, I mean, it's no joke.
But I think as the world, we become like a police state, and we've got this McGillicuddy lockdown on the cultures, and everyone's afraid and voting conservatively.
McGillicuddy lockdown.
God,
I love that so
much. That's a phrase from Lord Grunge from Grand Buffet.
Is it really?
Yeah, I want to shout him out.
The first thought I had there is I want to give that to Frontalot for the "Would you go see a band called McGillicuddy Lockdown?"
Frontalot's new record that's coming out in 2040. No, but as the world becomes like a dystopian, like nightmarescape, and as the forests continue to burn, one thing we have is Teenage Dirtbag.
That's the one thing we can all agree we still have.
Do you feel like people have an identification with that song because at the beginning of Loser, when they show it, you see the Trade Center. It reminds us of a pre-9/11 world.
Oh my God. It very well might. Brendan has said many times that is one of his favorite, considering like the placement of that song in that movie really wound up not doing anything for the band. But the fact that it's this crazy aerial shot of the song playing with this view of the Trade Center is pretty wild.
Who's the lead guy who was in American Pie, who was in that movie?
Jason Biggs.
Well, it got Jason Biggs in the video, which then gave it like this iconic stance.
It's true, actually.
And that helped pay for the video, I guess.
It's kind of crazy. Like, at this point, I have no data to back this up, but more people have seen the Teenage Dirtbag video than that movie, I'm sure.
Yeah.
At this point, which
They
is
think
crazy.
they all think it's from American Pie.
Everyone thinks it's from American Pie because it's Jason Biggs and Mina Suvari.
And the guy and she was in American Beauty.
Yes.
And the guy who directed American Beauty just did that 1917 or 1918 movie. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't yet. I was actually planning on going to see that this weekend. I heard
Highly
it's
recommend
fantastic.
it.
You saw it?
Yeah. But I mentioned it because the American Beauty connection.
Right. Yeah.
Apropos of nothing.
He directed American Beauty?
Yeah, crazy,
Sam
right?
Mendes?
Yeah, and it's his grandfather's story that
Wow.
he told him that he turned into this.
I didn't
movie.
realize it was the same guy because he made Skyfall, right?
Yeah.
I think that was, yeah.
He's had an interesting career.
Yeah, it was all over the place. I love that. I love people who do different weird things.
That's what's up. Yeah, that's why I like you, Matt.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm just glad we're friends for life.
I am too.
And in a mbop, you're gone.
In an mbop, you're not there.
You ever see that shirt that's Hanson and it says Nirvana and the Nirvana font under them?
I've seen that.
I wanted to do a shirt where it was Frontalot's face as MC Lars. But he nixed that.
He did not like that
I
idea?
shouldn't have asked him.
I was like, if you didn't ask and that just was at the merch table, honestly.
I feel like half of my podcast is me making fun of Frontalot. But it's really just like this rivalry, but we're not really rivals. We're just friends. Maybe I should just not do that.
Well, no, I mean, it's
not
I think
fresh.
If it's a friendly, I think friendly rivalries are fine.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I guess that's what's up. It's like when Brendan is always doing interviews, he is always talking about Rivers Cuomo nonstop.
I know. It comes up with...
He mentions him lovingly.
He does. We've never met those guys. It's funny. We've had like online communication with them and stuff. Like we had a nice like back and forth about the dirtbag thing when that happened. But we've never actually met.
What would they say? Still rivers run deep. So Rivers is still running deep with his lyrics. And then they did the Toto thing with Weird Al.
They did this.
So tight. Why was Toto such a hit all of a sudden in 2017?
I don't know. Again, a great example of longevity, right?
That Toto's Africa. I'm sorry. Africa is the Teenage Dirtbag of 1982.
That might be true. Have you ever seen the video? Someone did a YouTube video where they took the song Africa and they recut the song so that every word plays in alphabetical order.
No. That
Well, that's
amazing.
highly recommended.
Those are fun.
If anyone is still listening to this at this point, definitely check that out.
And you know what's kind of funny is that Africa wasn't supposed to be on the record.
Oh, yeah? It was one of those?
Yeah. You know what's sometimes funny I like to do on Reddit is like troll people. So when Weezer did, you guys can go to my MC_Lars account and see my posts, and there's proof of this. When Weezer covered Africa, Toto went and did a Weezer song, and it was on the front page, and they posted it, and then my comment was, this is probably because Weezer covered Africa. And I got so much, no one knew I was joking. Like, no duh, fool.
You got downvoted to hell?
Downvote, and everyone was like, all these comments, like, obviously, are you stupid or something? Or when Old Town Road got like 1 billion hits, I commented on there, Lil Nas X, you're doing great. I wish you all the success. And all the people were like, he's already successful. That doesn't mean anything. You know what else is funny to do?
What?
You know, on Venmo, you can see people's purchase histories.
Yeah.
So if someone like Brendan pays you the first session, it says,
yeah.
So all my Facebook friends are on there. A lot of people I don't really know. So I always go through and comment and leave like weird messages like, thanks, I'll get you next week. or like, that was awesome. Or like, congratulations, I can't believe, like weird comments that show I'm somehow involved in these transactions.
I love that.
And I confuse people.
A friend of mine or a friend of a friend on Venmo started recently doing this really funny thing where you can just send any amount of money to anybody. So this person would just take any random friend they had and would just send them 2 cents with like advice. It was like just my 2 cents. So they're just like going down her entire friend list and just being like, I think you need a haircut. 2 cents.
That's
like
good.
That's a really, really funny.
You don't have to pay a commission on that.
No,
2 cents.
No, it's just
so you could do it 50
maybe it's like I think you maybe for if you use your bank account it costs, but if it's out of your Venmo balance, yeah, they don't care.
Listen, you can do that
Just
joke 50 times.
I know, yeah, a lot of times.
For $1.
$1.
Wheatus.com
Wheatus.com.
for the upcoming tour days. This has been a good one. This is a long one. I don't think I'm going to edit much out.
Yeah, well, whatever you want to do, man.
For anyone who's still listening, if you go to a Wheatus show and see Matt Milligan and say the words magical tofu, Matt Milligan's going to get your email and I'm going to send you an MC Lars prize pack.
I love that. Magical tofu.
To Matt Milligan, and then you have to give him your email, and the limit to the first 3 people.
3 people. There's going to be a lot of shows. You got to remember, because it's going to be a little while. I think the touring is going to probably start in the summertime.
What if someone says magical tofu? Will you be confused?
I will not be confused, because I will never forget this day.
Okay, magical tofu. And I'm going to send you a prize kit, which includes a shirt with my name and Frontalot's face.
Frontalot's face. Very limited. Don't tell him.
Is that a great concept?
I think it's great. I mean, honestly, like if you had made that shirt and there was just like a video, a hidden camera shot of him seeing that would be...
He's very protective of his intellectual property. So I think both of his fans really... He's revered, and he's the reason why we're all doing the Nerdcore stuff. Love you, Damien.
Damien's great.
Love you, Damien. And he's fun to play with.
I love playing with Damien.
Yeah.
I'm lucky. I've gotten to play with you and Damien. I feel like I'm like, that's...
the difference with playing with him is you're playing the song with me. You're trying to compete with like the whole MP3 of the original recording. Right?
It's very different. But I love your playing with you is like the most like joyful, like chaotic experience.
I don't have many notes usually ever for rehearsal.
It's just like, well,
they don't play songs you don't know.
I was saying, like, we'll get on stage and you'll just start the backing track to something we've never heard before, and you'll be like, yeah, it'll be fine. Like, okay.
It's fine. That's the whole thing. Like, you can be sloppy if you get the choruses, if your breath control's good.
Yeah.
And I know by the end of the song, you'll know it.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
My songs have this weird, like, schism where they're like, there's some that are real simple and some that are, like, confusingly difficult, like really complicated.
Yeah.
There's nothing really in between.
I'm trying to remember when we did the Gold Sounds, there was one song of yours that was like incredibly complicated.
Was it like Guitar Hero Hero or something?
No, it wasn't that. We didn't do that one, I don't think. It was maybe it was Dragon Blood. I don't know. It was something that were like the number of chord changes was shocking. Like it seemed really repetitive.
Yeah.
And it moved so much.
Probably Dragon Blood.
Maybe it was Dragon Blood.
That was the guitar for that was written by Monty Pittman, who's Madonna's guitarist.
Really?
Yeah, who's awesome.
Wow, look at you.
Yeah, that's tight.
Not bad.
Shout out to Monty Pittman.
Shout out.
Okay, we should wrap it up. 2 hours.
Jeez.
All right, thanks for listening. Remember the magical tofu for the prize kit. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Lars.
Oh yeah. but you don't know. Can you tell me? You say you can, but you don't know. Can you tell me? Which flowers? No, you can, but you don't know. Can you tell me? Daisy, yeah, you can, but you don't know. Can you tell me? Daisy, say you can, but you don't know. Can you tell me? Say you can, but you don't know. Say you can, but you don't know. You don't know how, don't know how. Bop, doo, bop, bop, doo, yeah, yeah. Bop, doo, bop, bop, doo, yeah, yeah. Bop, doo-ba-da, bop, doo, bop, ba-da-da, bop, doo, bop, doo-ba-da, bop, doo, yeah, yeah. Bop, doo-ba-da, bop, doo, bop, ba-da-da, bop, doo, bop, doo-ba-da, bop, doo, yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Matt. Great interview. We have right now the MC Lars Patreon Larson of the week. This week we got Phil calling from upstate New York. Phil talks about first hearing me when I opened for MC Chris and downloading my music illegally. And he says some really nice things. Phil, I think you're super nice too. This is Phil's very kind message.
Hey, Lars. So what I was going to do is I was actually going to go see MC Chris, and I saw you were on the tour ballot, and I had no idea who the hell you were. I just had learned about MC Chris the day beforehand, basically. And I looked and saw who you were, and I downloaded some of your music illegally, and I said, oh, shit, this guy's really good. So I went and saw you. I paid a bunch of money and bought a bunch of your guys' CDs and absolutely loved you and thought you were one of the most awesome, nicest people I've ever met. Met you a few times since then, and you've always been one of the nicest people I've ever met. You are such a great dude. You are a tribute to Nerdcore. You are amazing. Thank you for doing what you do and keep these awesome podcasts up. My name's Phil, by the way. Take care, brother.
Thank you, Phil. Your shirt is in the mail. Next week, we have an interview with my cousin, Stuart Handler. Tune in for that. Come check us on tour at nerdcoretour.com. Thank you, Matt, for being on the episode. See you soon.